The Golden Harvest Studio Lot, Stage 4, a warehouse-sized production space that smelled of sawdust and machine oil, where the world's most dangerous stunt performers came to work every morning and nobody called an ambulance unless something had already gone very wrong. 1,200 people in that building. Crew, fighters, stunt coordinators from 3 countries, a press contingent that had been invited to watch a demonstration showcase for an upcoming film release. One of the most beloved entertainers on Earth stood at the center of the floor with a microphone in his hand, a grin on his face, and absolutely no awareness of what he was about to walk himself into. He pointed across the room. He said a name. Then he said, "You wouldn't survive 1 round here." The 1,200 people laughed. The man whose name he'd said did not laugh. He set down the drink he was holding, and the next 40 minutes would become the most carefully guarded secret that Hong Kong's martial arts film community kept for the better part of a decade. Stage 4. Cut to interior. Controlled chaos. 1,200 people. The smell of sawdust and possibility. No music, the ambient noise of the room is enough. Jackie Chan in 1980 was not yet the Jackie Chan that the Western world would spend the next 20 years loving. He was something more specific than that, something that people who were paying attention in Hong Kong already understood and the rest of the world was still catching up to. He was 26 years old. He had been performing since he was 7, trained in the China Drama Academy in the Peking opera tradition, which meant he had spent his formative years in an institution that treated physical training with a seriousness that would make most military training programs look recreational. Acrobatics, weapons, combat forms, the rigorous total body conditioning of a performance tradition that demanded complete physical mastery is the baseline. He had survived that. More than survived, he had distinguished himself. He had graduated with a body that could do things human bodies are not supposed to be able to do, and a mind that had learned to think in 3 dimensions about movement, space, and timing in a way that most people never develop even through decades of separate training. He had then gone into the film industry, not as a star initially, as a stuntman, which in Hong Kong's film industry of the 1970s meant something far more serious than the Western equivalent. Hong Kong stuntmen in that era were expected to perform techniques at full speed, at real heights, with real falls, in real environments, repeatedly until the director had what he needed on film. Jackie Chan had been doing that since the early 70s. He had the injury record to prove it: broken fingers, cracked ribs, dislocated shoulders, knees that told weather with the accuracy of a barometer, the accumulation of a man who had been putting his body into genuinely dangerous situations regularly for the better part of a decade. By 1980, he had broken through as a star. Drunken Master in 1978, The Young Master in 1980, films that showcased something the martial arts cinema audience had not seen before. A fighter who was also a comedian, whose physicality was simultaneous athletic spectacle and character, who turned the choreography of combat into something closer to dance than anything that had come before. He was beloved, genuinely, specifically, warmly beloved, in a way that stars sometimes are when the audience can sense that what they're watching is real, that the person performing these things is actually doing them, that the risk is actual, that the body on screen is genuinely capable. He was also 26 years old, which, in the specific mathematics of confidence that applies to physically gifted men at the peak of their early power, produced a version of certainty that was not entirely calibrated to the full landscape of what was possible. Chuck Norris arrived at the Golden Harvest showcase as a professional courtesy. Golden Harvest had produced several of his Asian releases. The business relationship was genuine, and the event was the kind of thing that serious people in the industry attended as a matter of professional maintenance. He was 40 years old. 40, in a room where the energy was youth and speed, and the spectacular physical confidence of people who had not yet discovered what their bodies couldn't do. The entertainment press, when they covered his presence at all, covered it in the past tense. The American karate champion, the man who had appeared with Bruce Lee, the franchise star of the Missing in Action era,
a figure of the previous decade, present in 1980 as a courtesy guest at someone else's showcase. What the entertainment press coverage failed to include, because it didn't track this kind of thing, was what Chuck Norris had been doing from 1958 to 1980. 22 years. 22 years of daily training in Tang Soo Do, in judo, in the cross-discipline work that came from training alongside Bruce Lee and the people Lee trained with. 6 consecutive world middleweight karate championships won in actual competition against actual opponents who came specifically to take the title. He was training with the Machado brothers. He was incorporating BJJ groundwork years before the wider martial arts world understood that groundwork was the future. He was, in the specific and demanding sense that the word requires, still actively becoming. He stood at the edge of the room in a gray shirt and dark trousers, holding a drink, watching the demonstration with the still attention of a man who finds genuine interest in watching other people do difficult things well. Jackie Chan had a microphone. Jackie Chan had 1,200 people. Jackie Chan had not done the full accounting.
Demonstrations, film clips, a question-and-answer session with the cast and crew of the upcoming production. The kind of event that the Hong Kong film industry of 1980 produced with a fluency that Hollywood couldn't match. Raw, energetic, genuinely engaging, designed for a crowd that understood and cared about the craft being displayed. Jackie Chan was in his element. He was funny. He was physically dazzling. At one point, he demonstrated 3 techniques in sequence on a stunt coordinator who had been doing this for 15 years and was still visibly impressed. He was warm, generous with credit, accessible in the way that the genuinely talented sometimes are when they're among people who understand what they're doing. The crowd loved him. 1,200 people, and every one of them was with him. Then the host invited questions from the floor. A journalist near the front, press credentials, Japanese publication, martial arts focus, asked about the future of martial arts cinema. Specifically, how did the Hong Kong approach compare to what was being produced in America? Jackie Chan grinned. He had an answer ready. He had been giving a version of this answer for 2 years, and it always played well in rooms like this one. The Hong Kong approach, he said, was real. Full contact, full commitment, genuine risk, genuine technique, no wires when wires weren't needed, no camera tricks when camera tricks could be avoided. What you saw was what happened. The American approach, he said, and here the grin widened because he knew where this was going, and 1,200 people were going to love where it went. The American approach was very, he paused for the right word, comfortable. The room laughed. 1,200 people. He wasn't done. He looked across the room. He found Chuck Norris in the crowd, which required some searching because Norris was at the edge, away from the main lights, exactly where you'd expect to find a man who came to watch rather than to be seen. He pointed. The room erupted. Not hostile laughter, warm laughter, the laughter of an audience that understands they're watching a performance, that the hyperbole is part of the bit, that Jackie Chan is doing what Jackie Chan does, which is to be more than the room expected at every available moment. 1,200 people laughing. Chuck Norris was not among them. He had set down his drink at the beginning of Jackie Chan's sentence about America. He had set it down carefully, the way you set things down when you're not thinking about setting them down because you're thinking about something else. He looked at Jackie Chan across 1,200 laughing people. His expression was the expression that people who knew Chuck Norris well had learned over years to read correctly. It was not anger, not ego response, not the bristling of a man whose reputation has been poked. It was interest. The specific, focused, forward-leaning interest of a man who has just been offered something and deciding whether to accept it. Jackie Chan had been watching him across the room during the laugh, waiting for the American to redden, to posture, to perform dignity. What he got instead was interest. The laugh faded. Not all at once. The crowd's momentum carried it for a few seconds after the room's temperature began to shift, but it faded. And in the quiet after the laugh, Chuck Norris said something. Quietly, not into a microphone, to the people nearest to him. 5, 6 people maximum, but in the specific acoustic situation of a large room that has just gone from loud to quiet.
The words carried. "1 round is all I'd need." It didn't happen in front of 1,200 people. The crowd cleared at the end of the showcase, the formal part, the press part, the public part. People filed out with a satisfied energy of an event that had delivered what it promised, and then some. About 30 stayed. Not by arrangement. Nobody announced that something else was going to happen. People who knew what was in the air simply didn't leave, and people who didn't know found reasons to linger near craft services or in conversation with someone near the edge of the room. The 30 who remained were serious, stunt coordinators, senior fighters from the Hong Kong circuit, 2 of Jackie Chan's closest training partners, a film producer who would later say it was the most valuable 30 minutes of his professional education, a combat choreographer who had been designing film fights for 15 years. The space they used was the far end of Stage 4, the working floor, cleared of equipment, under the overhead work lights that gave everything the flat, functional illumination of a space designed for productivity rather than spectacle. No cameras. The photographer who had been working the event had left his camera on his seat at the end of the formal proceedings. Something about the atmosphere of what was developing told him not to pick it up. He left it. He watched instead. He later said it was the correct decision because what he saw would not have been captured adequately by a camera anyway. Jackie Chan, to his full and permanent credit, did not hesitate. He had made the statement. He had made it in front of 1,200 people. He was the kind of man, the specific kind, not common, who considered that a commitment rather than a performance. He stepped onto the working floor. He rolled his neck. He moved through a brief warm-up sequence that the 30 witnesses watched with the specific attention of people who understand what they're seeing. The warm-up of a man who has been training since childhood, whose body preparation has the economy of long habit. Norris stepped onto the floor on the opposite side. He did not warm up. They faced each other on the working floor. Jackie Chan in training clothes, the informal clothes of a man who had been working all day and was comfortable in motion. Norris in his gray shirt and dark trousers, conference clothes, the clothes of a man who came as a guest, not a participant. That detail lodged in the memory of everyone who was there. The gray shirt, the dark trousers. He had not changed, had not needed to. Jackie Chan moved first. His movement was extraordinary. This needs to be stated clearly, because what followed cannot be understood without first understanding what preceded it. Jackie Chan's opening sequence was genuinely elite. The combination of Peking opera acrobatics with 20 years of film combat training produced something that 30 experienced practitioners watched with visible admiration even as it was happening. He threw a combination, not a testing combination, a real one, the kind built from 2 decades of muscle memory, the kind that doesn't require thought to execute because it has been executed so many times that it has become body rather than decision. It didn't land, not blocked, not parried, not retreated from, not landed. Norris moved inside the first technique, a pivot that was barely visible, the kind of movement that happens below the threshold of what spectators can consciously track, a 3-inch offset that made the technique pass over his shoulder rather than to his shoulder. And from inside that position, the inside position, the dominant position, the position that in ground fighting is called control and in stand-up is called already there, he placed one hand on Jackie Chan's chest. Flat palm, controlled pressure, not a strike, a demonstration. I am here. You didn't know I was coming here. I arrived before your technique finished. Jackie Chan reset, faster than anyone expected, and the 30 witnesses included people who had trained with him for years and knew his recovery speed. He reset and came again. The second sequence was different from the first. He had absorbed information from the first and adjusted. He was a 26-year-old who had been training since childhood and whose adjustment speed was one of the genuine distinctions of his ability. He didn't repeat, he recalibrated and came new. Norris wasn't in the path of the second sequence. A lateral pivot this time. The working floor lights caught the gray shirt as he moved, the flash of fabric and the flat overhead light. And then he was somewhere other than where the sequence was going. He placed the hand again. Different position this time, the back of Jackie Chan's shoulder, just at the point where maximum extension had placed the joint at its most committed angle. Here, and I have been choosing each time to place this hand. The choice has been mine. 3 seconds had passed since the beginning. Jackie Chan stood straight. He looked at Chuck Norris. Norris looked back. 1 breath. 2. Then Jackie Chan threw his best technique. Not the combination opening, not the recalibrated second sequence, the actual best, the technique that had ended most sparring sessions in his training history, the one built from deep muscle memory, the one his body had executed under pressure more times than any other. A spinning kick, the full rotation, the Peking opera-trained balance, the kinetic energy of a body that has been taught to generate rotational speed since it was 7 years old. It was genuinely beautiful. The 30 witnesses in separate retellings all paused at this moment in the story to say, it was a beautiful technique. Norris slipped under it. Below the kick's arc, down and inside simultaneously, in the space the rotation created when the leg reached its apex and the body was committed to the spin. In the 2 seconds that the technique took to execute, he delivered 3 short techniques, controlled, precise, placed, sternum, right shoulder, left hip flexor. Not injuring, not intended to injure. A map. I was here, and here, and here. During the 2 seconds your technique took to execute, I was in 3 places you didn't account for. Jackie Chan came out of the spin. He stood. He processed what he had just learned. It took about 3 seconds. Then he started laughing. Not the performance laugh of a man managing an embarrassing moment, not the polite laugh of professional courtesy. The genuine laugh, slightly stunned, genuinely delighted. The laugh of a man who has just encountered something he didn't know existed and is experiencing the specific pleasure of having his model of the world corrected by reality. He said something in Cantonese. His training partner nearest the edge of the floor translated it later for the combat choreographer who didn't speak Cantonese. He's not comfortable, he's just quiet.
They walked off the working floor together, not separately, together. The specific proximity of 2 people who have just shared something and are still in the immediate presence of it. Jackie Chan got his own drink from craft services. He handed one to Chuck Norris. They talked for 20 minutes. Nobody recorded what was said. Nobody who was close enough to hear felt that reporting it would have been appropriate. The combat choreographer said in a 1989 interview about Hong Kong cinema's development that the conversation looked like 2 craftsmen discussing their craft. Specific, technical, mutual. The language of people who respect a thing they both know. What left with the 30 witnesses was a set of impressions. That Jackie Chan's genuine laugh, the real one, the stunned and delighted one, was the most honest thing that happened all day. That Chuck Norris's gray shirt, unchanged throughout, was somehow the image they kept returning to in subsequent years. That the 40-year-old in conference clothes on a Hong Kong studio floor had just taught 22 years of hard accumulated knowledge to a room that had spent 90 minutes laughing at his expense. And that none of it, not the technique, not the precision, not the placement of 3 strikes in 2 seconds during a spinning kick, not full power, not intended to injure, chosen specifically to communicate rather than damage because communication was what the moment called for. That choice, the choice of communication over damage, of instruction over demonstration of force, was itself the final piece of information. The piece that Jackie Chan's genuine laugh had already acknowledged. A man who could have hurt you, who chose instead to teach you something. That's not comfort, that's depth that has moved past the need to prove itself. And in that depth, in the 22 years that produced the gray shirt presence at the edge of a room in Hong Kong in 1980, is the answer to every question that was asked publicly that night by microphone and answered privately by working floor. You wouldn't survive 1 round here. He survived considerably more than 1 round. He survived it in conference clothes. He survived it without warming up.